afternoon, everybody. Hello, my name is Yvette. I'm Yvette Oak, Chief Medical Officer, and welcome to Friday Report Out. I've had a couple of weeks off on Fridays due to some family occasions, and I've really missed Friday Report Out, so I'm really thrilled that we to be back here, and I know that I've missed a couple of good ones, so I'm going to catch up on the recordings. But we've got a packed agenda today, but the first duty, which is a very pleasant one, is to present one of our Lean 4 leaders, Carol Utley, with her certificate. And Carol, please come up, and where is the... Oh, they're here. Thank you, Rosie. I wasn't following the signal properly.
It's inside the first one.
Okay. So, Carol, I'm currently doing Lean for Leaders.
And you're saying it with a smile on your face.
And I've just had my Module 3 teaching, so now I'm waiting to do my Module 3, or I'm about to do my Module 3 Gemba work. I am even more full of admiration than I would have been a few months ago. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Has it made a big difference to your work?
A massive difference, yes. Not managing a team, so not being operationally managing a team. I was going out on the Gemba, on other people's Gemba, and being respectful. But actually, I've really enjoyed it, and it's just something that's just carried on now. It's taken me a year to get there, to finally get to this point, so I've done it, Helen, at last.
I have to say, well done for keeping on, Carol. You, honestly, well done.
Yeah. But yes, and it's something that I just use every day now. There's always different things that are coming up, so yeah. But good luck.
Yes. And well done. Yeah, no. So now I'm going to invite Value Stream 2 Tim Hyle, and I think Steve, but Steve is not with you today.
Well, Steve's in the MD team.
Okay, and this is on RPIW5 of Value Stream 2 around scheduling, and it's the 150-day report out.
Thank you. I hope this isn't too much of a disappointment after missing a couple of weeks. So, I'm here to talk about RPIW 5 from Value Stream 2. The premise behind this RPIW was essentially that we had patients who had extremely long waits for surgery, and then we were compounding that problem by asking them to come in for their procedures with only 1 or 2 weeks notice. Really poor patient experience. You know, bless our patients, they gave us really good feedback, but we know that actually, would you prefer to have had a bit more notice for your surgery and to have waited slightly less time? Of course they would. So, during the RPIW, we found that what we were generally doing with our routine elective cases was just using them as filler around urgent cancer cases, and it wasn't just having a proper look at our demand and capacity. We didn't have the capacity to schedule the routine elective procedures as well as we should, and so we were building up more of a backlog. We found that if we scheduled better, we could increase our capacity, and we could define some lists as routine elective lists. So we would only have routine elective patients in these sessions. And so one of the objectives of the RPIW was to get that set in stone to have regular scheduled sessions. And actually that was the easy bit. We did that, and we got them identified well in advance, and even before the problems that I'm going to come on and tell you about, we already said there will be a list of this type on this day. However, we also identified, and some of you have been before and heard me talk about this a couple of times already, which I'm sure is great for you. We also identified that one of the reasons that we were struggling with both of these issues was that we didn't have a urology rota produced. in a timely fashion. We didn't have 8 weeks notice, we didn't have 6 week notice. On occasions we were producing the rota with less than 1 week before the sessions were due to run. Which, you know, we are setting our admin teams up with an impossible task of, you know, we want you to fully book all your operation, all your surgical lists, we want you to fully book all the outpatient clinics, and we want to make sure that all those patients actually attend and are the right patients for those sessions. Just ridiculous what we were asking people to do. So we looked at the process of producing the rota, which, you know, to some extent it's a relatively simple task. You have to look at leave, you have to look at teaching sessions, you have to put all these different things in and build it up. Not that difficult, but the level of expertise is who could support which trainee, who could cover which specialty, how much capacity, all those different factors made it slightly complicated and made it a task that needed a review by somebody senior enough to do that, and on this occasion it was our lead clinician, Steve. So we defined the process and asked him to be doing this on a week-by-week basis, 6 weeks in advance. And for the first couple, it worked great. And then we slipped back. He had other issues to deal with, so we had then 2 weeks to do. Something happened the next week, he had 3 weeks to do. And before we knew it, we were back on blocks of 4-week rotas being produced at late notice. However, I'm pleased to report our current position is we have rotas into August. So what's changed since the last time we reported out, when we didn't? We now have the right person in place supporting Steve in doing this. And I think there's been a sort of mind shift for me, that the support, Helen O'Reilly, particularly generally, it's been working with Steve to find out who is the right person to be on his back about it, basically. I clearly wasn't, because I couldn't do it, despite emails, telephone calls, etc., etc. He wanted Helen to be supporting him and Helen to be doing some of the tasks. He trusted her, she knows the department, etc., etc. So some of that has been devolved to Helen. And the reason that I'm not here now saying, so, we've solved that problem, we're going to look at closing it down, is what we now need to do is to make sure that this process is replicable. We need to, what happens if Helen's not there, and what happens if Steve's not there. We now need to test giving the rota production to somebody else to do, to say, with a minimal amount of coaching on the standard work instructions that we have got defined, can somebody else pick this up? Is it sensible enough for somebody else to do that with the right amount of reminding and cajoling from their admin support? However, what we have done, and you know, at various points we have had the rota out for a lot longer than a week, 2 weeks over the course of the year. So it's sort of bounced a bit up and down. But that has had the impact of our procedures year to date compared to last year. We have done quite a bit more. And that's bearing in mind that throughout January we did virtually nothing. And from January, February and March we did very little routine elective inpatient work. So this has largely been the success that's post-March. And this is because we are covering sessions that would otherwise have been stood down, and because we're giving patients more notice, we've got a reducing patient cancellation and DNA rate. So the byproducts of doing that are the stuff that patients know, can communicate us, and we can make alternative arrangements when they can't come in. And that's all because we're giving more notice of what can be booked and when. The other thing is, our RTT performance is also improving. We also have a better understanding of what outpatient capacity we can run, and we're giving the teams more opportunity to book patients more in advance, rather than saying, can you book these clinics with 1 week's notice? So, finally, on the what have we done so far, our 5S of this process is moving up. It's been at level 3 for a while, I think, but we are working towards getting level 4. So what have we learned? First thing, the standard work that we've put in place. I mean, this is learning for me, really. I think that I hadn't quite got my head around this. The standard work doesn't take out human factors. You know, people still potentially need a bit of a bit of cajoling, a bit of a reminder, and that can be part of the process. What we've done is say, this person will be the link person, and if you've not got it finished by Tuesday, Wednesday, she's going to ring you up and say, have you got it yet? But that's sort of part of the standard work for this. The reminders are built into the process. But it is a case of a bit of pester power to remind him again and again and again if necessary. And the other thing is, last time I stood up and talked about this process, I was feeling a failure because we'd been at it for quite a long time and it didn't seem too much of a complicated process, and why can't we just sort this? But change takes time at times. Yeah, we had identified what we wanted the process to be, but to get it embedded, to get it working, it have taken a lot of time. And I feel for the first time I'm standing up here saying, I think we've actually pretty much cracked this problem. You know, we do need to make it replicable, we do need to PDSA it, but I think that we've broken the back of it, which is a big achievement for the team. Thank you.
That really is a significant achievement, and well done, Tim. And as you say, it's not. Now you need to replicate it beyond urology and mistake-proof it and make it resilient for urology too. So well done, thank you. We're going to save questions until the end to make sure that we've got time to hear all of our speakers. So now I'd like to invite neurosciences and informatics. This is a digital pathway project to come up and report out on their improvement project.
Yes. Sorry, cheers. We're just not then stood with
Are we in high order? Hello everybody, my name is Gareth and I'm a senior project nurse within informatics, and as Vet said, we're here to speak about our work on trying to create a digital ward and a digital pathway.
Hello, my name's Sarah Miller and I'm Head of Nursing for Neurosciences.
I'm Christina Leddy, I'm the Senior Sister on L15.
Hello, I'm Debbie Smith, I'm the Senior Project Nurse in Informatics and I've been working with the team on L15.
Hello, my name's Claire Brown, I'm one of the Band 6s on L12, one of the involved wards.
So this project was initiated back in January when Jackie, our CCIO, asked for volunteers who would come forward to nominate themselves to be the first digital ward and digital pathway within the organisation, and wards L15 and the stroke pathway were identified as being very reliant on paper still, as a lot of places are, but had a very strong desire to realise the benefits of working digitally.
So I think as a starting point it'll be really helpful just to add context to the work that we're doing, for us just to summarise the submissions that we put forward to Jackie and her team. Both the acute stroke pathway and L15 saw this as a fantastic opportunity to be part of the development of the digital solution for LTHT, and we were both absolutely thrilled to be chosen. We've seen a lot of changes in the stroke pathway over the last 3 years, and very innovative changes. We are very lucky to say that our national audit that we submit on a monthly basis, we've actually improved from historically we were achieving a D, and actually we're at a B now, and that's a system that's RAG rated from A to E, A being the best. So we felt that we were on a really positive journey anyway, with a strong multidisciplinary team. We already had multidisciplinary team notes. We'd also looked at the models of care and the models of workforce, and had an AHP and nurse ward care share model, which meant that the therapists were helping us improve the workforce on the wards and manage that Band 5 gap. So for us, the next logical step was to digitise these interactions that we were having as professionals. There was also a recognition that we'd seen an increase in the complexity of our community referrals as well, and the fact that we were seeing more patients that needed into-hospital transfer and repatriation. So to be successful, we also had buy-in from our commissioner colleagues in Leeds Community Health to actually think, yes, can we do something different digitally, and actually just think about the versatility and the functions that are out there, and actually how we can be connected together. Obviously the overall aim being to improve our patient outcomes and patient safety. So that was our starting point as a bid.
Yeah, we were very similar reasons on L15. I think the real turning point for us last year was the introduction of EOBS and EMEDS. That was a massive change on the ward, but actually it was a change that happened really, really easily. Staff were massively on board and they could see the benefits. As a nurse, I can't even describe the pleasure in not having to hunt down drug charts, and you know, it is just an amazing thing. And we thought, when we were asked then, you know, does anyone want to put bids forward, we actually thought this isn't going to be as difficult as what we potentially thought it could be. Our surgeons had already started recording electronically on PPM for op notes, and there was just a massive improvement in data collection, the data quality. It had a knock-on effect with coding, so it was just a really, really good opportunity.
Okay, so as you can see, at our starting point, we had some really bold ambitions, and actually the first phase of the work is to finish at the end of July. So the first starting point was actually managing expectations, the multidisciplinary team's expectations, and as Jackie would say, my personal expectations around what we were actually going to achieve by the end of July. And it was starting with the foundation, so we created a vision for the pathway in the ward. So it was starting with the foundation blocks really. As an organisation, we already had IT and technology, e-documentation that was ready, available and there to use. So it was about embedding the use of what we had existing. So we were becoming paperless at the point of care. It was to enable professionals to make to enable professionals to have safe decision making through the introduction of technology and supporting better decision making. Another key point was around remodelling processes for technology to support the removal of single points of failure, and for us as on the stroke pathway to refer to our Leeds Community Health colleagues for the community stroke team referral. It's still actually a fact, so for us that was a real key point actually. We really need to start doing something.
So the work started with a readiness assessment. We actually needed a picture of where we were starting from, and Debbie and I from informatics created a digital readiness assessment that we then visited the ward and looked at various aspects of digital functionality and analysed whether they were being used already or not, and pleased to say that in some cases up to 70% of the things that we identified as being already available, the wards within the pathway and L15 were already using. But it also came to light that we were still really paper heavy, and as Sarah's just said, faxes were still being used, which in this day and age seems far removed from our digital vision. There was some limited use of some key functionality within our principal electronic health record, PPM Plus, that we thought we could improve on. Devices is always an issue, and people's access to them was limited. And also there was some limited awareness of what actually was already out there.
Okay, so what did we do? For the stroke pathway, our starting point was actually to do a process map. So the patients are admitted in accident and emergency, then through our acute stroke pathway to stroke rehabilitation and then home. So once we had that pathway clearly mapped out, it was looking at the communication and the interactions between professionals and the MDT along that pathway. We then collated the bits of paper that were associated with that pathway, and it was absolutely astounding. A patient could have 135 pieces of paper filled out from their point of admission to the point of discharge. So we then engaged with our KPO colleagues, which was an excellent opportunity for the MDT within stroke to get some education around the Leeds improvement method and 5S. And we held a 5S workshop which actually looked at the process map, and we did the sort start of the 5S just to look through and see actually what's necessary. It was a really, really cathartic process because actually we could see where there was duplication, and the outputs of this were going to feed through the e-documentation group. So yeah, it was a really helpful exercise. Christina's going to talk about a bit later around some other things that we've done, and I think Gareth's already touched on the training needs analysis.
So the changes that we introduced to the wards to start with was we introduced the 4 new electronic nursing documents and removed the paper versions off the ward. So it guided everybody to use the electronic documents, and of course we provided training and education on those. We introduced the PPM Plus mobile app to the wards. We looked at what additional hardware the wards needed, so things like laptops on wheels, iPads, what they already had, if anything was broken, to enable them to become fully digital. And the wards were amongst the first ones to use a single sign-on, which has been really successful.
So what else did we do? It actually feels like we've done loads. So paper-free coding for the majority of our patients. Pretty much all of our coding on vascular now is done remotely. And the data collection quality is so much better. It says here the majority of VTE assessments recorded electronically. That's certainly the case for all of the patients on L15. I think there's still some outlying vascular patients elsewhere, but we just mainly are concentrating on L15, and I think you're the same on stroke and neuro. All of our op notes are now electronic, our surgeons are all on board. For the nurses amongst us, we don't have our traditional nursing cardex anymore. Nurses document their communication daily onto PPM via free text annotation. Our ward rounds are paperless. On L15, we've just very, very recently removed all of our medical notes off L15, so there's nothing even there to take on ward rounds anymore. It is all done electronically. The nurse in charge goes on ward rounds, and historically she would be documenting exactly the same as what the doctors are documenting in a medical note. We use a multidisciplinary handover on the ward, so doctors, nurses and AHPs all use the same handover, and that's updated during the ward round handover. Paper cull. The amount of paper that was on the ward was absolutely obscene. You know, some of it goes back to historically it's just been there forever. Others go back to when you need one of something and you're having to place an order, 250 get delivered. So we've been quite brave and quite ruthless and removed quite a lot of the documentation that was there, just mainly to send a message that we are digital. You know, our nursing care plans are electronic, so we don't have any false care plans on the ward anymore. We don't have any paper papers teas on the ward anymore. All of our friends and family tests are done electronically. We don't have any paper friends and family cards anymore. Visiting disciplines to the ward also now document on PPM, so the pain team documents on PPM, dietitians document on PPM, and the last people really to use our paper medical notes are the dialysis team, the satellite dialysis team, and there's currently a form being devised for them on PPM at the moment. Our medical staff are currently trialling no paper handovers on the ward. It's a work in progress. And one of the really, really big things that's happening on the wards at the moment is that we obviously still have paper during admission. That paper is then taken away to scan. It is scanned onto PPM, and the paper generated during that admission is then destroyed. It doesn't go into the medical notes. I'm currently doing an audit that's got another week to run to see actually can we get rid of ever ordering historical medical notes back onto the ward. We tend to find generally anaesthetics will want to see them for past anaesthetic charts, so I've currently run a 4-week audit. It's got a week to go to look at actually why do you need these notes to see if we can truly be paperless. And then we did a big piece of work where we did 5 S's to our nurses station, looking at what's kept at the nurses station, and obliterated maybe 90% of what my ward clerks do, where they would document a patient's journey in one book and then in another book and then in another book and then in another book, and none of that happens now. And it just happened because it historically had always happened. You know, they put a note on PPM if they've made an outpatient appointment.
So staff feedback has been really, really positive, and I have to say across both areas, the staff have absolutely engaged with this process, and we've had a wonderful project team supporting us. Claire yesterday was saying that it's just so much easier to have remote discussions with doctors. You're concerned about a patient clinically, you can pick up the phone and actually have that conversation and then look at the same piece of information as you electronically. I've definitely seen an improvement in our ward metrics on our acute stroke ward, and that's definitely down to the digital e-documentation that we've been using. It is a cultural change, and I think some areas are further on than others. I think 12 and 15 are pretty much on a par, and we've got quite a lot of work left to do on 21. And it's just about embracing that cultural change, and that's what we just need to concentrate on in the next few weeks. And certainly the pop-ups on the e-documentation that you have access to. So a patient who has a type 7 stool, it's great now, you think, gosh, sample required. But actually for neuro, that's been really helpful, because our last 2 C. diff RCAs have been very much around sampling practice. So yeah, it's been great.
So what's next? So we have ordered some new laptops and iPads for the wards to become fully digital, so we'll get them on the wards soon. We want to work with our community colleagues, because one thing that we found in the stroke pathway was that the AHPs in the community write a lot of information on System 1, which isn't visible to users within the trust, so we're working in partnership with community colleagues to see whether we can improve that. We're going to start looking at referrals to community teams as part of the specialist referral work, so as well as internal referrals within the trust. We're going to look at how we can refer out to Leeds sort of based GPs and AHP teams, and the stroke team is the first one that we're going to practice or pilot with. We're going to work with the eMeds team to look at how we can enable dietitians to prescribe an eMeds. The phlebotomists are going to do a trial on L15 with a new OrderComms app, which will be on an iPad, and they'll have a wireless printer, so the staff can order the blood test that they require, and then the phlebotomist can come and print out the blood cards in real time when they're with the patient. We're going to continue with rolling out all the nursing e-documentation as it's developed, and continue with some AHP training on handover and how we can get them a little bit more involved with the electronic handover process.
Thank you.
Brilliant, and you kept the timing as well. Thank you very much. Honestly, you know, Christina and Claire, thank you for coming from your wards. Claire, you didn't get a chance to say anything. Would you like to say anything?
No, just if anyone had any questions, but at the end.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we'll come back to questions at the end. But Sarah, Debbie, Gareth, thank you very much indeed. And Jackie, you must feel really proud, and I think we really look forward to seeing the digital wards rolling out further across, probably across the LGI, and also we know that Chapel Allerton and Wharfdale hospitals.
We've already started the work with Wharfdale, so we're up at Wharfdale next, and then hopefully Chapel Allerton after that.
Yeah, okay.
And then a big rollout next year across the whole trust.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks very much. So now we're going to hear from Value Stream 3, which is about critical care step-downs, critical care working with neuro. And this is RPIW 3, 30-day report out. Steve, are you here to report out? And have you got colleagues as well? Come on down. Thank you very much.
I'm going to let Fiona introduce everything, but I thought I should just apologise first for not being quite as snappily dressed as Tim. For also not having quite the number of pictures that Tim had on his slide set. But I'll hand over to Fiona. Hello, my name is Steve Wilson. I'm the Clinical Director for the Neuroscience Service.
Hello, my name is Fiona. I'm Senior Physician on Ward L25. So our RPIW is about in ward rounds on Ward 24 and 25.
Sorry.
There we are. Lovely. So we had a look at our ward rounds before we started this, and we identified there was lots of things that weren't quite right with them. They were quite rushed. At the end of them, the plans were quite unclear. There was very little patient involvement, and the overall patient experience was pretty poor. And on top of that, the ward staff quite often weren't sure what was going on following ward rounds. They were disorganised with no defined start times, so staff were waiting around on the ward, waiting for ward rounds to start, waiting for doctors to arrive. And the impact of this was on the rest of the day was that delaying the actions that had started from the ward round, and also delaying preparing patients for discharge. It meant the AHPs and the nurses don't really know what's going on until the handover, which happens at sort of 10:30, 11 o'clock, by which point the majority of the morning's gone, and we're not able to action things we could action sooner. We came up with a plan to improve on this. We sort of looked at the way we run ward rounds, and we thought of sort of for the patient experience of bookending it by when we go to a patient, starting by introducing yourself to the patient and finishing the conversation with the patient with their estimated date of discharge, and in the middle just having a discussion with the patient about their care. To do this, we liaise with the MDT to ensure that all information is available for the ward round, before the ward round on PPM. So when we get to the patient, we've got all the information ready to discuss with the patient. And also following that discussion, the registrar would then dictate the ward round directly into PPM using speech to text software, and to rule out any sort of time wasted by then writing it up on paper or via the computer. So we've got a number of actions from that. The first one, which I think was the most important one, was to create a team agreement for everyone who's involved with ward rounds to stick to and to sort of to agree to, as it were, and also to create a standard work for ward rounds so the doctors knew exactly what they were supposed to do when they arrived, and then to create ward round training sessions to teach the doctors how to use the speech to text software. That's the only thing that we're not quite up to date with yet, and we've started it, but we haven't trained everybody yet. Other actions we've got, other actions we've got was to create a standard work for the MDT to know how to input their information onto PPM so it was available for the ward round, and to arrange access to speech to text software and the hardware, the Mikey things, so that it could be done on the ward while we're on ward round.
So we've made some progress in certain areas, and we've been less successful in other areas. And I think one thing that's really come home to us, and I think Tim really summed it up, is the issue of time. We're at 30 days following the RPIW week, and with the pressures of work that all the clinical staff have, it has been difficult to get everybody trained up in how to use the software. It's been difficult to get full engagement from the medical teams specifically. We've had fantastic engagement from nursing staff, we've had fantastic engagement from AHPs, and it was interesting what the previous RPIW team was saying around the digital pathway and how they're facilitating MDT and AHP handover, because that was a key part of this process, was getting the AHPs to enter their detailed information about every patient into the PPM system, into the handover sheet, so that it appears as the front page of that patient's care record at the point of care when doctors do their ward round. So we have made some progress. So we started out with our baseline lead time of 87 seconds with a target of 225 seconds. We are still within that technically at 172. We've increased the lead time by 98%, but we're within our overall parameters. One of the key KPIs for this was to not make the ward round take longer than it currently did, but to just add quality and value to individual patient interactions within the time allocated. And we do think we're just about managing to do that. Our baseline lead time for time spent with the patient was 16 seconds, which alludes to the quality issue that we were trying to improve on. And we felt that based on the overall time for a ward round, we could get up to 150 seconds potentially with each patient. And we're around about 136, so our actual time spent speaking to patients has increased by 750%, which we think is a reasonably good result. And Fiona will talk about this a bit later on towards the end of the presentation around the sort of perceptions and benefits that we think patients have had from that. Where we've done less well is on some of our quality measures. We felt that it was important that every doctor introduced themselves to the patient with "Hello, my name is" at the beginning of the ward round, because although the doctor quite often knew who the patient was, it was very clear that the patients didn't have a clue who the doctors were. We've obviously did reasonably well within the RPIW week, but not surprisingly that has fallen off a bit since then. And again, this is about embedding that concept with the clinical teams and spreading that word around all the different doctors who are on that ward round and all the different members of the multidisciplinary team. And Mr. Sheikh, who's quietly sitting at the back there, has been very, very good at spreading that word and encouraging it. But as you can see, we've still got a little way to go. So we'll be coming back at 60 and 90 days, and hopefully we'll be seeing that gradually improving. Equally, the measure around providing an expected date of discharge is something that we again need to improve on, and again that's just about embedding that process, and James's idea of bookending our ward round with "Hello, my name is" at the beginning and "This is your expected date of discharge" at the end is probably the way forward with that, and that's something that we've learned through the 30-day process. The other issue that we identified, I suppose you'd call it a rock in our shoe, is around IT and access to equipment and access to, in this case, the speech-to-text software, which Mr. Sheikh managed to do pretty much independently. And I think what this represents, and this isn't a criticism, because I think the digital informatics team and Ward 15, the digital pathway have identified the same thing. The enthusiasm and the energy that clinicians are putting into this is effectively outstripping the ability of IT to keep pace. Because we know all this technology exists to be able to do all the things we want it to do, but to be able to get that in and introduce it everywhere that people want it, it is just impossible. And I think that's, again, it's something that at 60, 90 days, 150 days, hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate significant improvement in. But we did have issues accessing, I think I want to pick something up. Sorry. We did have issues accessing the speech-to-text recognition software. We've had issues with sufficient IT equipment on the ward, but IT have been very supportive in general about that. We've had issues getting hold of microphones to be able to dictate directly into PPM. So it has meant that the progress was much slower than we would have liked it to be. But as I say, it's 30 days, so there's plenty of opportunity to improve beyond that. The other issue that we identified was allowing people time to be able to do this, because ward rounds are taking a little bit longer. They're definitely better quality, and we're releasing time. Fiona's going to mention this later on. We are releasing time, but all our registrars have got other places to be. They have to be at an outpatient clinic. They have to be in theatre. So the onus is on us over the next process to try and make sure that our registrars actually have the time to be able to do the ward round in the way that we feel is a benefit to patients and the patients benefit from. And finally, as I say, staff engagement with medical teams has been a bit on and off. But again, that's something I think every RPIW has commented on, and something that we just need to take on board. And the more people use it, the more people see the benefits of it, I think we will get that engagement over the long term.
Go on to what's gone well. Looking at time saved, so we're currently estimating with just the one ward round on ward 25, we're saving about half an hour to an hour each day for the doctors and nurses, not having to duplicate writing up the ward round. If we manage to go all the ward rounds on both 24 and 25, we think we'll probably save a minimum of 20 hours a week of SHO time, which is half a whole time equivalent, which is amazing if we can get to work. I mean, for me personally as a nurse in charge, it's released me to be able to go and do things like chase up referrals and maybe do the IVs for the ward, support the ward teams, and for the SHOs so they can get the EDANs done sooner. And also it makes the SHOs quite happy that they're really pleased with the time that they're being saved already. The other feedback we've had from the patients is they're really enjoying this new format of ward round and them being involved in the whole discussion, and they've got a better idea of what's going on. We've had positive feedback from the patient flow team, who finding that the information is right there at their fingertips throughout the day when they're looking at getting patients onto to wherever they need to go to next. And they're able to communicate back to us quite efficiently if the referrals have been only half completed or they've not been quite sent, and it's been picked up on ward rounds, and that means we can challenge at the time wise and it's been done. Also, we've had good feedback from the other MDT staff, and we've got people who weren't involved previously, like the pharmacists, who want to be involved with this, which is really good. On top of that, the actual outcome of the ward round, the plans that we're creating are very clear and comprehensive, which is a massive improvement on what it was. People know exactly what's going on because the regs are dictating themselves into the microphones. The plans they're coming up with are much better. And we've had excellent support from all of the MDT, the physios and the OTs have been really good. So our plan going forward, as you can really see there, we need to really push for the medical staff to start using the speech to text to dictate, to push for the IT equipment to be in place, and then to push for the quality metrics such as the hello my name is and the estimated date of discharge. And then when that's in place we can start rolling out across 24 and also across all three ward rounds of 24 and 25. We went to clinical governance and presented our team agreement, and there was no rebuttals from it, so I'm taking that as everyone's agreed to it. And from that, some of the more senior doctors agreed to try and start and make a rota for start times for ward rounds, so then we're a bit more organised from the start of the day. And then when we roll this type of ward round out to all three ward rounds, it'll be more organised, and that's a really good step forward. And we're also just going to continue to audit our quality of the ward round and the MDT engagement by PPM.
That's fantastic, Fiona and Steve, thank you very much indeed. And I thought when you said you'd save 20 hours, I didn't realise that there was the possibility that there were another couple of ward rounds that you could roll it out to and other wards. So given that I know you often have a shortage of medical staff, particularly juniors, it can only help, and it's really great to hear the benefits for the patients, because if they get more than 2 minutes of interaction with the clinical team, they're bound to remember more and find out more about their care than 16 seconds, aren't they? So that's brilliant, well done. And we look forward to hearing more, and if there's anything we can do to help, I'm sure Jackie and will be listening, and whatever else we can do to help on the digital side, we will. So this brings us to not quite the final part of the agenda, because the final part is about questions, but we have a really important duty to perform now, and Celeste, I'm going to invite you up to join me. I'd like to introduce to you Celeste Derheimer. Celeste is one of the executive coaches from Virginia Mason Institute in Seattle. Some of you may have met her already, and she's spent the week with us.
The room.
And for those of you who didn't realise, Julian has beamed in
yes, that's the noise you can
via FaceTime. So he is in London or Manchester at the moment, but he's taking part in Report Out. But we have a very special duty, and Celeste, would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. So I thank you, Rosie, for the setup. Just really quickly, because I've heard conversations about the Leeds improvement method. And what I've enjoyed, so Helen has achieved and is going to receive recognition for her achievement. And what even though I've only been your assigned sensei for a few months, I have been out and about here since the beginning of your journey. Kicked off the first couple of value streams in the sponsor sessions. And what I have seen in terms of Helen's evolution in this process is she really takes to heart the Leeds improvement method. And what brought real joy to my heart is hearing embedded in the work, whether it was an RPIW or work you're doing every day, like the fabulous digital work that the second group described. The Leeds improvement method is embedded in everything you do. It's becoming more and more so, rather than a layer of something else. And Helen has always been passionate about that. The tools, the philosophy, the technique. And what excites me is what I am seeing, and we were talking about how the culture in the KPO is reflective of the culture in the organization. And so when we think about the Leeds improvement method, what I have seen with Helen is an evolution to this becoming her management method. And I'm starting to see that in the organization. Because improvement is part of our everyday work, or if we do this well, it truly is. You know? And then I was so inspired when I heard you talk about having to look at the current state in the digital work. That's what we do in the Leeds improvement method. 5S, oh my gosh, I almost started dancing. There is a 5S dance. Anybody wants to know it, happy to share. So what I have seen, and I am starting to see in the organization, is a real evolution. Because right now, you've got your value stream map work, right? So your high-level value streams, that's your cross-functional, which is moving into your daily management, your strategy work that you're doing. And so it's all starting to talk to each other. The synergies are really, really starting to click. And Helen will be a very big part of that journey now, because part of our goal at the Institute, at Virginia Mason, and I've just learned Institute means something way different in the UK than in the United States. Not surprising, I've learned that about a lot of words. She actually is helping us go away so that you will stand on your own. And she is one of those people who is able now to help you do that. Because that's our goal, is to visit, to see what you're doing, but not be the ones help you doing anything. So are we ready to invite her to come on down?
I think we are. So
Helen, or come on up.
Please. Please.
Oh gosh, it's in a frame with
and receive this. And I can honestly tell you that it has been a joy to watch Helen grow and develop in this role. I can also tell you that there's been blood, sweat and tears that have gone with this. But what's fantastic is actually yesterday Helen and I were having a one-to-one conversation, and she said to me she's really applied the method to herself, and she's achieving all she's achieving without working in the evenings, without working at the weekends, which at the beginning I know you were doing lots of.
Yeah.
And actually part of our ambition is to ensure that all of us can do today's job today, and that actually we improve our own working lives as well as that of our patients. So it is really with great pleasure that Celeste and I present Helen with the fact that she is now a certified, that means something different.
That's certifiable.
She is a certified leader.
Or accredited, whichever language you would like to
leader
use.
in the Leeds improvement method, and the Virginia Mason production system.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
a big round of applause. Would you like to say a few words?
I do have to tell a story on Helen.
Okay.
Because when we were finishing up her very successful completion of the requirements, she mentioned that one of her colleagues had completed hers and had gotten her certificate via email. And she goes, yeah, it's in my inbox. And she said, I would not want my certificate. So I'm taking notes here, and I've got a big knot. And so I have to thank Rosie and Sophie, because yesterday I said, could you so very kindly, I'm going to go a step beyond, find a frame to put this in. So just know that Kathy not only did not get hers brought to her, it is not
in a
frame.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing this moment with me. It's been 3 years of a most amazing journey in the organisation. All of you in the room who I recognise as being part of that, so thank you.
Oh, well done, Helen. I don't know if Julian... Are you still online, Julian? We might have to turn you up.
He is still online.
Are you able... Julian, do you want to say anything? I don't think he can hear us. Right, well, we will, I'm sure, we've already acknowledged Helen's qualification, but we will we'll make sure that Julian also has a photograph of you and your certificate. So, have we got any questions for any of our teams who've presented? Helen.
So I'm Helen Volley, I'm the GM for Head and Neck. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone that's presented. My question is for Tim.
So Tim, stand up.
I'm just really interested, Tim, in the ophthalmology value stream for the last Rapid Improvement Week that we did. The rota issue has become the crux of our challenges for embedding those improvement ideas that we were raised in the initial week. So I'd be really keen to understand and to gain, I guess, some lessons really about how we can approach that rota. So I'd be really keen to link up with the team that did the Rapid Improvement Week 3. If there's anything else that you could share,
yeah,
I'd be very grateful.
I mean, I think you know, the crux of it was taking as much as possible away from one individual doing it without stepping on their toes. And there's that thing of, you know, it's mine, you know, protective of your workload. And actually, you know, we can populate the annual leave for you. You don't have to open up all those different files to look at who's on leave. We'll do that for you. That's not something that you're worried about. And then other elements. So once you've got that, take the next bit and the next bit, and then leave them with as little as possible that requires their specialist knowledge. So God, I've thought of something. Working to
the top of your talent.
Thank you. Working to the top of the talent. That's the bit that he needs to be doing. He's doing.
Can I ask about the complexity of, we have a lot of trainees, and that is what guides our rotoring, and I think it's that element between providing a full rotoring clinics and then actually providing the trainees rotor that adheres to all of their needs and balancing that.
Yeah, it's very similar challenges in that. So yeah, we'll put teams together.
Thank you.
Okay, Celeste?
I have a question for Tim.
Thank you.
So Tim, you mentioned, let's see here, something about Ring You Up. You had something about kind of nagging, pestering. I'd like to hear you maybe change that mental model. And so when somebody isn't receiving something and they ring someone up, what might that be an example of?
I feel like I've been tested now.
You are.
I mean, so I suppose...
So he can phone a friend. Anybody got an idea on that?
That was my question. How can we eliminate the waste of ringing?
But what you're doing when when you're calling is a type of KPO, come on, chime in.
State proofing.
And it's a what?
It's a work.
Great. It's an and-on. Yeah. So that's an and-on. Right now you have a human and-on. And so now how do you look at that process and say, how do we take that human and-on out of the process and put a different kind of and-on? Because it's really a signal that I don't have what I need.
That this is the point at which
Right?
this should have been done.
Yeah. Sorry, Tim. I knew you know I like to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
It's the perks of
Yeah.
the job.
I mean, I think what we've been doing previously was saying there is a schedule here, and we
Right.
expect you to follow that.
Right.
And when he wasn't following it, everyone was getting irritated by it, and it was coming to me to be that human and-on.
Right. And you weren't the right human and-on.
No, I was the wrong person
Yeah.
to be doing it.
So
Absolutely
you
the wrong
made a step
person.
in the right
That was then why Tim calling me about it. Needed somebody who was part of the team to be giving him I mean, I'm describing it as nagging and stuff, but it's a gentle reminder from somebody he trusts to be able to do that reminder.
It's a signal.
Yes. Once we've got it established, we want something that's different to that, but we're in the process of making sure it works week on week on week rather than at the moment.
And this is amazing because I was in this RPIW week, and how long has this particular process been in place?
Oh. I've only been in post 3 years, so.
Yeah. So it was entrenched.
Yeah.
And the fact that 150 days you can come here and say, look at the difference we've made, that's amazing. So congratulations to you and the team.
The team.
And actually, Celeste, you made a really good point, because I suppose one of the things that I would like to say, value stream 5 was about how do we get all of our patients who are acutely admitted seen by a consultant within 14 hours. And we all knew really that the answer was that we needed consultant ward rounds in the evening. But that had been said before. And actually the Leeds improvement method and the RPIW led people, the consultants, to understand that that's what was really needed. And that's what they put in place. And we've just done a repeat audit of the process on across the trust. But medicine and elderly have achieved between 94 and 97% of all of their patients being seen by a consultant within 14 hours. And I absolutely know that we wouldn't have got to that place by now had it not been for using the methodology and the tools. So for those of you who think, well, we don't really need to do an RPIW because we know what we need to do, it's about the process of getting all the people in the team to understand what they need to do. And I willingly admit that I know the consultants are some of the most difficult people to make to get that point. But they're crucial, and once they get it, they will become advocates. So Asim, we need you now to be that advocate amongst your colleagues, don't we? So that's brilliant. So is anybody else? We've got 1 minute left. Joe. Oh, actually, we might have 3.
Really good question.
Joe and then Alexandra.
Seen with the digital journey, because safe discharge is so dear to everyone's hearts in the trust now. Is there something about your approach to this that's helping with that specifically at that point in the patient journey? Is something working better in that world that would give us hope, sort of reaching out beyond it, or is that a further piece of work that you need to think about?
I think for the pathway group, that's definitely a further piece of work. I think the next phase, thinking about the electronic community referral to CST, that absolutely will help. It's I think we need to do a bit more measurement really, just to look at the impact of that.
Okay, thanks. Alexandra.
Again, it's to the Euro team, and I'll kind of go that way as well, if that's all right. The digital ward is absolutely brilliant, and you talk really passionately, which has been lovely to hear, about how you are now paperless on that ward. And I suppose from our perspective in outpatients, is there a bit that we can look at the initial stage of that now? That is, for an outpatient perspective, where we can link with those consultants and those teams to see where we can start to make those differences, where we've already started to, but actually make it that bit better from your perspective?
Can I answer that on behalf of the team? The work that we started at Wharfdale will start in outpatient, so that will be where we focus on the ward and the pathway here. At Wharfdale we will be focusing on outpatients first, so we're already starting to have those discussions up there.
Oh, right,
And
okay.
we'll transfer that learning as quickly as we can.
Okay. All right, well, can I just close down report out now? Thank you. It's getting quite warm in here, isn't it? But honestly, it's been fantastic once again. We've heard, you know, from Carol and how the impact of her Lean for Leaders has worked in outpatients and the quality assurance of the service there. We've heard from Christina and Claire and Debbie and Gareth about all the work that you've done in the digital ward, and great leadership from Sarah as well. So that's fantastic, and I think the vascular surgeons leading the way. That's brilliant, and you'll be pushing them. I know, Christina. Yes. From Tim on really difficult issues on grasping something out of the hands of consultants, but making life so much better for our booking team and therefore for the patients. And it was fantastic to see how many more operations you've done this year than last year. And then from Fiona and Steve about the work that you're doing on the ward round, because that's fantastic. And Asim, although you didn't say anything, and Kirsten, you're here and you're in the room. So those are all really great improvements in being patient-centred. And finally, Helen, your accreditation. I can't get accreditation.
Certifiable.
That's fantastic, and we're so proud of you. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you again for report out. Is it
Friday the 13th?
Friday the 13th of July. So okay, and round of applause.